Serious, what was the closest you've ever been to killing someone? When my daughter was 7 weeks old, I was going out to the coffee shop around the block from my house. It was a rainy day, but had stopped briefly. I put her in my Moby wrap and went out. I went and got coffee and a sandwich. On my way back home, I went to step up onto the sidewalk. Instead, my toe clipped the curb. I fell forward. My daughter was thrown out of the wrap and onto the sidewalk. Luckily, I was closer to the ground as I was falling as well, and the fall wasn't as far as it could have been. She began to cry immediately and all I could do was sit on the wet sidewalk, rocking back and forth crying, as a woman was standing next to me saying, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god." I didn't have my cell phone with me BC, I was just running out. A kind gentleman let me use his and I called my husband who was working around the block. He was there in seconds. We went to the emergency room, got lots of tests done, watched as my 7-week-old daughter was placed in a CT scan. I felt so helpless. She was completely fine. It was the worst day of my life. I can still close my eyes and see her falling to the ground. Although this experience was terrifying, it taught me some important lessons. Kids are resilient. If they cry immediately, they're probably okay. If they move immediately, they're probably okay. You're gonna F things up as a parent, so be easy on yourself. I operate heavy equipment, dozer excavators. These things weigh over 30 tons on the light side for perspective. Anyways, we had just started a brine pond project and had just hired some new laborers. They were as green as they come, lol. Anyways, I used my two-way radio to ask them to come over to where I was to tear down a set or barricade so I could proceed. One of the laborers literally ran right up beside my machine without making direct eye contact or radio contact. Industry standard is to do so. I can safe out the machine. I was backing up at the time, so I was watching behind my machine. When I turned around to go forward, the laborer literally 2 inches from my tracks. Needless to say, I've never pressed the engine decal pedal as fast as I did in that situation. If I was new to the machine or inexperienced, the guy would have been an empty toothpaste roll on the ground. I had a girl that bullied me daily in the 9th grade. She told me to kill myself almost every day and that I was worthless. She threatened to beat me up and even threatened that she would kill me. I went to the counselor and she said it was nothing and I should just ignore it. No one wanted to help me. There was one day she cornered me on the stairs. They were multiple stories and I was on my way to class. She was standing next to the railing, yelling at me, telling me how worthless I was and I should just jump off the roof to save everyone the annoyance of knowing me. For a split second I considered pushing her over the railing. We were on the 3rd floor, so I don't know if she would have died or just been severely injured. Regardless, I considered it for 1.5 seconds before I snapped back into reality and just took off down the stairs. I've never been a violent person with violent thoughts, but if she had gotten physical with me, I don't know what I would have done. I was 13 at the time and I'm 25 now. I still remember it sometimes and shudder. I've never had a thought like that since. I went to the counselor and she said it was nothing and I should just ignore it. Freaking schools, man. You get bullied for years on end, you report it, and no one gives a dang. But the second you fight back in any way and suddenly you're at fault. My arm is scarred to crap from a kid tripping me while I was running on sidewalk. He was never punished. My wonderful husband had several brain tumors and died a horrible, painful death. After he died, shortly before our 25th anniversary, 5 different people told me how lucky I was to be a widow and not divorced like them. There is a reason they are divorced. Had an abusive stepfather when I was a kid. A bit pedo creepy. Would do things like accidentally let his robe gap open with no underwear on. Would start tickle fights as an excuse to get gropey. That sort of thing. That was nothing next to the beatings, gaslighting, manipulation and other varieties of psychological and physical torture. I hated him more than I've ever hated anyone in my life, and one night I decided to try to make rat poison tea. Turns out the rat poison we had wouldn't dissolve in the tea. It's for the best. He's still in butthole, but at least I'm not a murderer. That's probably smart of the rat poison company guys. When I was like 14 or so, I was on a swing at a park. I was going about as high and fast as that swing could possibly go. A kid who couldn't be older than 2 wandered directly in front of me as I was coming down. I slammed my feet on the ground and stopped myself about an inch away from her. My hands started to bleed from the chain, but at least I didn't drop kick a 2-year-old all the way across the park. The mother saw the thing happen, but she was too far away from us to do anything in the moment, but she ran over crying and thanking me for stopping. My roommates wanted to rearrange the dorm room in college. We had bunk beds. I said we knew to break down the top bunk into pieces, take the mattress off, then the bottom spin bit, etc. She said no, we got this, we can just pick it up as a whole unit. I told her I do not possess enough strength to that. She told me it would be fine, so we lift this bed whole, straight off the bottom bed pegs. The height difference between us is over a foot, so I kinda dropped it trying to even it out with her end, and shock of all shocks, it ended up falling. She was backed against a windowsill. She tripped and fell back and her head caught the windowsill and the bed came down on her. One of the legs caught the sill and her head ended up being trapped between the bottom rung of the bed ladder and the sill. We had to yell and get some help. If that leg wouldn't have caught the windowsill, she would have had the whole weight of the bed come down on her exposed neck, breaking her neck, probably crushing her throat and who knows what else. Honestly, she was literal inches from death. We had to pause and just let that sink in for the rest of the night. The bed still got moved though. Drunk student fell into the road in front of me. I swerved and wrote off 2 cars and injured my passenger. I was fine. He didn't even hang around to thank me. Little W. When I was 15, I carried my 2-year-old cousin down a flight of stairs when I tripped and we fell down 3 steps. She fell on the back of her head and I on top of her. It took a split second before she started crying and I thought she was dead. Thankfully, she was fine, but I'm so glad she didn't fall harder or over the handrail, or else she would have fallen at least 3 meters and would probably be dead. This unattended kid ran into the street as I turned into it. Didn't even see him at all because of how tiny he was. Just heard something hit my side view mirror and that's when I saw him rubbing his head. Stepdad spit in my mom's face after not having abused her in over 5 years, so I shoved him. He said he was gonna come back and kill us and ran out the door, so I followed, picked him up from behind, carried him off the porch and slammed him headfirst onto the cement and then just beat the crap out of him while neighbors came out, got arrested, and got my first felony. Your only mistake was not taking him into the backyard so the butt whooping was away from prying eyes. Good on you though, man. My mother and little sister are the only people I'd ever do any more time for. Driving tired once. Had a micro sleep and woke up driving down the wrong side of the road. Fortunately it was late at night, no traffic around, but could easily have killed myself and my passenger. Never driven tired since. I volunteered at an orphanage in Thailand a couple of years ago. I had been gone for about a month and when I came back they told me about a guy who had been sneaking into the girls' dormitory and raping some of them. The girls were so scared that they wouldn't sleep. These girls were all between 1 and 12 years old. All of the other staff were women and the guy would physically overpower them when they tried to stop him from getting in the dorm. I am a paramedic by profession, so I have a bit of a personal respect and value for human life, but this guy had crossed so many lines. I went to the local police and asked them for help and they told me to deal with it. I waited right inside the door of the girls' dorm until about 2 AM with a large bamboo pole. I didn't want to kill him, but honestly I didn't have any problem if it came to that. As soon as I saw the door open I rushed him and knocked him over the porch railing. He had a machete but he dropped it when I tackled him. I jumped over the railing and started beating him as hard as I could. I am not a tiny guy and I also have combat training, so I was quite effective. He fought back but I had the size advantage and I was raging. After about 2 minutes I realized that I had broken my hand and quickly grabbed the bamboo pole and swung it around as he tried to get up and run away. It nailed him in the side of his head and sliced most of his right ear off. I swung again and did kiss him out. He ended up with a broken nose, left cheek, missing ear, dislocated right shoulder and broken left arm and hand. I broke all of the fingers in his left hand as well. I stopped just short of killing him, but not because I didn't want to. I knew that if I did kill him I would have to live with that and I didn't want to give him that power. I already have a ton of guilt just from patients who have died in the field or in the ambulance. I couldn't bear to kill someone in cold blood like that even if I was justified. I ended up walking away with just a broken right hand and some bruises and sprains. The girls got to sleep though. To this day he hasn't been back. TLDR. I almost killed a child rapist that terrorized an orphanage. You did a good thing. Nurse here. Unit was very busy and I mentioned to her patient we needed to start her on antibiotics. Patient consented. I hung penicillin, only to find out our computer said she's anaphylactic allergic to penicillin. Incredibly, she must have outgrown her childhood allergy. Beat myself up for a long time for that near miss. Won't make that mistake again. Mom was in an abusive relationship for about 8 years. About 6 years into it, me and my ex stopped by to pick mom up as she said the guy was drunk and she wanted to leave. We arrive and as I approach the front steps I look up into the glass door and see a pair of hands shove my mother out of view. She went frickin' flying. I raged out, grabbed an axe that was nearby. Dude would chop trees on property and sell bundled firewood. As the guy stepped out front and downstairs, I chased him around the perimeter of the property whilst almost blacked out in anger. A buddy of his who was staying there temporarily was on the side of the house smoking a cigarette and tackled me. Luckily, the axe didn't penetrate my chest seeing as I landed face down with the axe pinned against me. Could have been all types of messy in 2 ways. Fast forward about 2 years and abusive guy gets into car wreck and passes away about 2 months after I got into car wreck on same street in a similar truck and walked away with cuts and bruises. I've decided if some way somehow I ever find out the man who molested my 4-year-old sister and gave her an STI which her finding out about it later in life was a large part of her suicide that he will die. The chances are slim next to none that it will ever be discovered who that person is and he could already be dead for all we know. But if I ever found out I'd send his freaking head to his family for what he did. And I'm right there with you brother. I was a little kid and my cousins and siblings, all a few years younger, were in the bathtub and I used the hairdryer to dry my hair. Well, obviously. Then I wanted to make waves for them so I held the hairdryer very close to the water. My mother and aunt lost it. Will always remember this how they, for obvious reasons, yelled at me for hours. Never got anything electric close to water again. The GFC I would have saved you. Had a patient who was essentially a vegetable. I had to wrestle with him and keep him pinned to the bed. Most of his muscles had contractions but he was still shaking and stuff due to the pain we were probably inflicting on him. While the nurse pumped fluids out of his lung through a hole in his neck. This guy's entire existence was just lying in bed being in pain semi-choking on the fluids his body was producing inside his lungs only to be pinned down, have us remove the worst parts of it and the cycle to begin anew every hour or so. It was heartbreaking. This was not healthcare, this was torture. It would have been more humane to let him die. I felt ashamed and still do because I could not bring myself to kill the man. My Mill is a nurse and this is her worst fear. She made it very clear and has it written in multiple places. She does not want to be kept alive. Grabbed a screwdriver in a desperate attempt to dislodge my ex-husband from strangling me. Swung up and only put a hole in his shirt. Really wish I hadn't missed. When my younger sister was in middle school, she took a very sudden and unexplained dip in personality. She went from being a bouncy, sunny kid who loved going outside and seeing her friends to kind of reserved and struggling to keep her grades up. Her friends stopped coming around. Crazy rumors about her started, and she was just overall really depressed and nervous. Our parents were very into the just suck it up mentality, so they told her to just push through and be better. I tried to get her to tell me what had happened and she told me the same thing she told our parents. The kids at school were bullying her and her friends were being mean. I didn't buy it, but there was nothing I could do. One day at the dinner table, we were all talking about town gossip as was family custom. And my mom brought up how a teacher at my sister's school was looking for a hand in getting rid of some old furniture from his late father's house and that my mother had volunteered the family to help out that coming weekend. My sister immediately broke down into having sobs, howling at the top of her lungs as though someone had died, and you can probably guess where it went from there. She confessed that her teacher's son, who was a sophomore when my sister was in 7th grade, had assaulted her, and when she tried to tell the teacher about it, He shut her down and called her a liar and had said he would fail her if she tried to tell anyone about it. I had to spend the following day in class with this butthole while my parents sorted out how to handle the situation, and it took everything I had not to lose my crap on this kid. I am not a violent person, but I had to sit there with him a foot away and all I could think about was smashing his face into the tile until the light left his eyes. That was over 10 years ago and he's in jail now, but I still think I'd have to contain myself if I was in the same room as him again. Let me just start by saying my dad was extremely abusive. Mentally, physically and emotionally. He beat on my mother and I quite a bit. He also hunted a lot, deer mostly, and it was a big tradition in our family for the uncles and cousins to all go together. My grandmother, mom's mom, pulled me aside the day before opening day and told me she would buy me a car. I was 15, almost 16 at the time, if I shot my dad out in the woods. She told me no one would ever know, and she would get me the best lawyer money could buy if it came to that. I agreed. To this day, I wish I would have pulled the trigger. I was too scared and my conscience got the best of me. I know I would have gotten away with it, and it would have saved my family so much trouble down the road. He's dead now, but I wish I could have been the one to do it. Didn't see a car coming and almost turned in front of it. My passenger pointed it out to me. Pointed it out sounds so casual in this context. Oh look, there's a car coming towards us. Does accidentally count? Because I leaned against an unsteady bit of wall my mum had told me not to. It fell and covered my little brother, 3-ish at the time. Surprisingly he was mostly okay. A few broken bones and cuts, concussion. But it very much could have killed him. Mostly okay, just a few broken bones. My boss asked me why I wasn't doing any work after working a 70-hour work week and taking one lunch break for the week. I was so mad and work a job where we carry knives on our person I had to throw it across the room, and I just picked up my bag and walked out. This was all before my actual start time after I had been working almost half an hour and still wasn't supposed to start for another half hour. A motorcycle was hit by a public utility vehicle and went flying into the side of my car. If I came a split second later, I would have ran the guy over. At least that was actually an accident. When I was a kid, I once shot my brother with a cardboard arrow I had made out of a real bow. I thought that the cardboard would surely crumple on impact. It did not. It was sort of like a super punch, but had I hit his head, it probably would have killed him. Grandma got moved to a real shady nursing home. Her concierge doctor, who she paid $3,000 a year to specifically stay a patient of, refused to go anywhere except this one nursing home. It was an old piece of crap. First day go to visit her and she is covered in crap and pee. Not one person came to check on her or answered her buzzers. They dropped her day 2 and she had to go to hospital. Go to her room to pick up stuff and found a nurse in her chair eating all her food. Day later family was visiting and said her TV was missing and they replaced it with some ghetto small one. I rushed right over, and I was like, if they robbed her on top of this, I'm going to kill these goddamned nurses. Turns out the TV was fine and people were just hyped up and over suspicious. The bad nurses did get fired and grandma had an okay time there. I mean, it's a nursing home. They are all pretty much crap. My older brother, it was after my mother had passed away. I was working 3 jobs so that my older brother and 2 younger brothers could carry on studying and make something of themselves. 4 years in, I find out instead of him paying the bills, I was giving him more than enough for all the bills. With the money I was giving him, it was not enough. He was taking out debt on my name. Turned out after 4 years of working 3 jobs non-stop, I was in about $100k debt with no money left in my bank account. The only reason he did not die that day was too many people got in the way. I didn't want to hurt anyone other than that trash of a crap. I hope you went after him legally. He should be responsible for that debt. My mum was dying in hospice. It was undignified and she was in a lot of pain, but she was still lucid. I asked her if she wanted me to help her speed things up. For context, she was a nurse before she got sick and I knew what I could do to make things happen. She told me she wished I could, but didn't want me to get in trouble or go to jail. We laughed about it a little bit. I maintained I would have a ball in jail. She died later that week. I spent most of it by her side. I am 100% pro-assisted euthanasia. Watching her go was torturous. Brings back my memories when my grandma suffered from breast cancer. Still a child, but that time I wish that she just died without suffering. 2 days ago my boss sold the company I built completely on my own for the past 17 years. We had an agreement he would sell me the company when he was ready to retire. Instead he packaged it up with his other company and sold it to another group. Never been so sick or pee in my entire life. All my life goals are gone and everything has changed literally overnight, but I still have my crappy job, so there's that, I guess. Gave my then 4-year-old cousin a winnagum. Poor thing ended up with the piece of candy stuck in his throat. All the kids, age 4-10, started freaking out, and when the adults found out something was up in the kitchen, full-blown chaos ensued. I remember someone holding him upside down by his legs, not the way people, and a lot of crying and screaming. Luckily somebody ran to our neighbor who's a nurse. Can't for the life of me remember how she got it out. Probably the Heimlich. It definitely lasted a couple minutes. I remember hiding on the couch and thinking that this would be a ridiculous way for him to die, but mostly I was feeling incredibly guilty and stupid for giving him that wine gum. Weirdly, my dad once had to save his little brother from choking on a piece of candy as well. Great family tradition. Not. My dad saved me from choking as a kid twice by holding me upside and smacking my back. May not be the proper method, but it worked in my case. 5th grade. We were studying the ancient Greeks, and we had a feast for it. My mom and I prepared baklava. Found out that a girl in my class, let's call her K, was allergic to almonds. She didn't know. Freaking traumatized this 10-year-old boy. Mom died in March of 2015. I was 14. Went to Philmont, NM that summer for a 100-miler. Scouts. Butthole leader that came with us rode my butt the whole time for whatever reason. Kept targeting me and pushing my buttons. Finally we stopped and he just out of the blue walked up to my friends and I and said, "Now you'll better be grateful for your parents. One day they might not be there. Isn't that right, Thomas?" And poked me in the ribs with his fat fricking fingers. He started walking away, and mind you, I really hate tough guys. Makes me cringe harder than just about anything. But I pulled the knife out of my pocket with the intent to gut him, but a friend almost grabbed me. Again, I'm not trying to be a tough guy, just made me angry. Dang, that's fricked. I had a teacher yell at me right after my dad passed away, and it's a long story, but she ended up not being able to come back the next year. I'm sorry you couldn't get any revenge on that butthole. Right after suffering a miscarriage, my sil told me that I don't know what being a family is like since it was just me and my husband, and that kids make a family. I had to be dragged away by my husband. Was ready to go to prison over that B. At first I read this as your sister having the miscarriage, and was going to gently suggest that grief can make people do weird things. Thankfully, I read it again and now I know your sister is a C. My mate got stabbed 8 times, almost died. We caught the guy but just beat the crap out of him. A lot of kicks to the head, but we didn't end up stabbing him like we planned to. Well, at least you taught him a lesson. Stabbing him wouldn't be worth it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.